Okay, guys, I want to talk to you a little bit about noise reduction and how I specifically use Lightroom to handle all of the noise reduction that I do in my photographs. So there's a number of different plugins that are available on the market these days, and Nick Define is probably one of the big ones. Back in the day, it was Noise Ninja, and I'm not even sure if that still exists anymore. But these days, I find that Lightroom actually does a better job than any of the plugins I've ever used for handling noise in my photographs. So I'm going to go through kind of a step-by-step here for you to see how I like to reduce my noise in photographs, and hopefully that's going to help you out with your own photography. So to start with, though, let's zoom in on this photograph so you can actually see what I'm talking about when I say that there's noise in this image. So I'm just going to kind of click in here, and you can see this is a picture of a coastal brown bear that I took up in Alaska during my workshop back in August. And you can see here in the background there's actually quite a bit of noise. Now, full disclosure, I have to be honest with you, this noise right here, that's 100% my fault. It has nothing to do with the ambient light that I was photographing in. It has nothing to do with my ISO settings either. In fact, if I come over here to the little histogram, you can actually see I was shooting at ISO 1000. Now with a Nikon D5, which is what I photographed this bear with, 1000 ISO should not create any noise whatsoever. In fact, I routinely take that up to 12,000 or more and still come home with very clean files. And so when I see ISO 1000 and I find this amount of noise in my background, I know one thing. Basically, I screwed up in the field. This has everything to do with my exposure and has nothing to do with the light or the ISO itself. And now, of course, ISO is a part of your exposure, but 1000 ISO, like I said, is not high enough to create this sort of noise. So problems happened elsewhere. But here I am back in Bozeman. It is what it is. This is my photograph. So how do I proceed from here? And that's what I want to show you. So let's jump over here. We're already in the develop module, which is exactly where we want to be. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom back out on the photograph. And I'm going to make sure that I have scrolled down to the details panel. Now let me just kind of scroll up just to make sure that you understand where that is. So when you come over to the develop module in Lightroom, you'll see this, and now I'm just going to kind of scroll down to details. That's the same palette that offers you sharpening, and then right below that is noise reduction. Now, first and foremost, I'm going to add noise reduction on a universal scale. When we say that we add some sort of adjustment universally, what that means is we're applying it to 100% of the photograph. That's the foreground, that's the middle ground, that's the background, that's our subject, that's absolutely everything. And so first and foremost, let's just go ahead and grab this luminance slider right here, and I'm going to bring that up to, let's say, about 90 or so, or as close as I can get to that without taking too much time to fight with it. So there we go, 91. That's going to do just fine. Now, for those of you who have already used any sort of noise reduction program, then you probably already have an idea of what this stuff does. And so we're going to come back over here, zoom into the photograph, and you can look at the background. You can see there's no more noise. It's nice and smooth and clean. It looks like it was shot with f2.8 really. But the problem, though, is when we come over to our bear. Now, when we look at our bear, there's no more detail. The bear itself looks like it was airbrushed. There's this, very distinct painterly effect to everything, and that's not okay, even though the background is exactly what we wanted. So to correct this, or to correct for this now, what I'm going to do is zoom back out again, and I'm going to come up here, just underneath of the histogram, to my adjustment brush. Now the adjustment brush, you can select this by just hitting a shortcut on your keyboard, which is the K key, or you can actually click the little icon here itself. It doesn't matter, they both do exactly the same thing. Once I'm in my adjustment brush, I'm then going to bring my arrow down here to show selected mask overlay. That's in the bottom, sorry about that. That's in the bottom left-hand corner of the develop module, but it's only there if you're in the adjustment brush. So you can see I already have this clicked. Now this is very important because what that's going to do is allow me to see exactly where I'm applying the adjustment brush to my bear. Without that clicked, then I'm doing everything blind. I can paint over the bear all I want to, but I have no idea if I've actually painted with inside the lines or anything else. So by having that clicked, the default for Lightroom is that everywhere I now paint with the adjustment brush is going to appear red. And then when I'm ready to make adjustments, I just then unclick show selected mask overlay, and that's going to bring back the bear, and I can see the adjustments that I'm making. Now, once I've ensured this is clicked, I then come back over here and you can see where I'm circling, you'll find auto mask. I always want to make sure that auto mask is also checked. This basically taps into Lightroom's version of some sort of artificial intelligence in which it tries to make a decision as to what you are actually trying to paint when you're using the adjustment brush. Basically what it's doing is it's trying to group like pixels, pixels that are similar color tones, contrast, various things like that. And so this just kind of helps us draw within the lines or paint within inside of the lines or color within inside of the lines, if you will. So now that I've ensured both are checked, the show selected mask overlay and the auto mask, I'm going to come up here to my bear and I'm just going to go ahead and start painting. Oops, that's not what I wanted. There we go. So as you can see, as I start to go over my bear, that red appears, and that shows me exactly where I've painted. And you can see I've bled over just a little bit. I kind of drew outside of the lines or colored outside of the lines. That's not a big deal. We can clean that up here once we have our bear painted. But the auto mask luckily is on, and so it's at least helping me stay with inside of the lines for the most part. If I did not have that selected, that would be a whole lot worse. So I usually start with just outlining my subject like I have done there. And then nice and easy, I come in and I just start to color inside of those lines, if you will. And once I've done this, I'll go through and I'll clean up the outside edge. I'll show you how that's done. If this was not just for a demonstration video, if you will, on how to reduce noise in Lightroom, then I would probably take a little bit more time to be a bit more precise with shading this guy in with my adjustment brush. So you can see there's some bleed over, the highlights weren't quite picked up, there's some hair that wasn't quite picked up, there's a little line right there, and so those are the sort of details that you want to be very careful of. But for the sake of this video, I'm just going to do kind of a quick and dirty job so that way I can get my point across to you. Now that I have colored in my bear and I've applied the adjustment brush to him, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down the Option key. Now I'm using a MacBook Pro right now, but if you were using a PC, this would be the Alt key. So it's either Option or Alt, and it does the exact same thing. And you notice with my little adjustment brush there that there's a plus sign in the middle. Now when I hold down that Option key or Alt key, that turns to a minus sign. And that minus sign basically means that I'm taking away areas that I'm now applying that to. So you can see I was very easily able to remove that bleed over right there. And we can do the same thing around the nose, of course, as well. Maybe, if we're lucky. I think the computer's having a hard time keeping up here. There we go. All right, so that's good enough. Again, you know, I wouldn't want to have that nose exposed like that. Let's just tap that one more time, and I would clean this up a little bit better. But this is good enough for government work, right? So now that I have my bear completely shaded in with the adjustment brush, I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to turn off Show Selected Mask Overlay, just like that. And see, it takes away the red now. Now I can come back over here to the panel of options that's associated with the adjustment brush. And if you look down here, you'll find noise. Now, unfortunately, this right here is actually mislabeled. It should not say noise. It actually should be noise reduction. If you were to use ACR, which is Adobe Camera Raw and is actually the engine that drives Lightroom, then this would in fact say noise reduction. That's the program that immediately pops up if you edit your raw files directly within Photoshop. But over here in Adobe Lightroom, I guess they just didn't have enough room to put the other word in there. And so you're left with the word noise, and you just basically have to figure out what that really means. So if you remember from the beginning, we had already applied noise reduction universally. So if this means noise reduction right here, then turning this down means that we are reducing the noise reduction. And so I'm going to crank this all the way down. Let's just say all the way to -100. So what that does is it turns down the noise reduction from the areas in my photograph that I have painted over with the adjustment brush, which of course in this case is just my bear. So I'm going to come back over, well, let's hit done first. Then we're going to come back over here and I'm just going to click on my bear, zoom in, and you can see there he is, or she is as the case may be. All that detail has come back into my bear while the background has remained nice and smooth and clean. So I find this method a whole lot simpler than going through and trying to paint or select all of this other space here. Usually there's just one or two areas in a photograph that I actually want to keep detail in versus removing the noise from the photograph. photograph. And so this is just simplifying the process. I'm adding noise reduction universally and then selectively removing it in key areas of the photograph where I want to remain or I want to contain or preserve detail, I should say. So let me click back on this guy one more time and look at this background. So this looks pretty nice. However, I do think it looks a little fake now. I mean, that is so smooth and so clean. I'm going to actually reduce the universal noise reduction that we did first, just to bring a touch of texture back into it, a touch of grain. This is not necessarily something you have to do by any means. This is really a personal choice, a personal taste. It's purely subjective, but I like just that little bit of grain back in the sky. It gives it a more natural look to it. So I'm going to bring this down, as you can see, to 62. It's probably going to take a second or so for the computer to catch up. And there we go. You can see, hopefully you can see on your end that there's a little bit of grain back in the shadows here and in the background. So that's my story. That is exactly how I like to reduce noise in photographs using Lightroom. No more plugins, no more additional money that I have to spend on other programs or anything like that. So if you happen to have a method of reducing noise that's different from this, I would absolutely love to hear it. And especially if it's groundbreaking or totally new, then I'd be more than happy to feature it in the next edition of Behind the Lens. Now, going back one last time to this issue of ISO 1000, like I said from the get-go, this is my fault. I shouldn't have had that amount of noise with ISO 1000. Now, if that is something that you're interested in learning more about, how to shoot with high ISOs, say 5000, 6400, 8000 ISO, and still come home with clean and beautiful images that are completely sellable, that can be printed big, then you're definitely going to want to make sure you don't miss the next edition of the Photographer's Journal. That's actually going to be released next week. So hop on over to the website. You can sign up to it there if you're not already a subscriber. And I have a feature article in this upcoming issue all about that. Thanks so much, guys. Have a good night.